Hello and welcome to Black Cats Chat, the international fans podcast for Sunderland AFC. My name is Lee Thurkle. I'm from the Bilbao Black Cats, and today we've got a Coventry fan on to preview Friday's game. I've dug out a Coventry fan. Now, when I say dug out, I haven't exhumed Jimmy Hill's remains. Uh, it's none other than my workmate, Tom Jupp. Tom, how are you, mate?
Very well, thank you, Lee. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, good. Well, listen, mate. I know from working with you for the last 12 years that you do like to be on time. But it
Yeah,
did cross my mind that you might try and start like the podcast a bit later, just like to start the shithousery early.
6 minutes I was planning on. Yeah, 6 minutes later.
Right. Well, anyway, mate, welcome to the podcast and thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
So listen, I suppose at the start of the season, you would have been expecting a playoff push, but by the end of the season, you probably didn't expect it to happen like this, right?
No, 100%. I think when you look at our last couple of years, we were a kick away from the Premier League a couple of years ago, and then last year we had a very poor start to the season, which we always seem to do. But then got that FA Cup run, and I think that kind of we lost momentum with that FA Cup run. A lot of people were focusing on that. Um, I wouldn't change it now, to be honest. I think it was an amazing experience. But yeah, then going into this season, I think we were looking at our squad. We'd only lost a couple of players. The previous few years, we'd lost 3 or 4 big players every summer, and I think under Robbins, we were feeling confident. All the fans were saying, if we get a good start, which we never do, we got a real chance. We got a real chance, and I think, I think before the season we were even thinking automatic promotion, but I don't know. I don't think anyone was really expecting Leeds and Burnley to be so far ahead of everyone else, and even Sheffield United, even though they stole a couple of our players. But I mean, it's they were light years ahead of everyone else in the league, I think, in the end. But yeah, I think we were hoping for playoffs, expecting, hoping, kind of a mix between the two.
Yeah, because last season, obviously, you finished ninth, and obviously, as you mentioned before, you finished fifth the season before when you got to the playoff final against Luton,
Yeah.
and you were a kick away, no? So you have been kind of there or thereabouts. But what was it with these slow starts, or what would you put it down to?
I think it was because we had such a small squad. Like the new owner came in a couple of years ago, Doug King, and before that we were under the ownership of Sisu, which I mean were awful owners, really awful owners. I think that was why we went so far down the leagues and were ground sharing and doing all these crazy things. And we kind of only had a squad of 11, and we had very little backup. We had very little options on the bench, and so a couple of years ago, when we got to that playoff final, we had Gyökeres and Hamer in the team, and we obviously lost them in the summer. And every year we kept on bringing in 3 or 4 players that were expected to just walk straight into the first team. And I think that was what it was, is that they had to kind of buy into Robin's philosophy, Robin's way of playing football. And it was those first 3 or 4 games, or even 3 or 4 weeks worth of games, where it just didn't click, and the players weren't quite all together on the same page. And then normally around the end of November, December, we started picking up. And that's what's happened the last 3 years in the championship, because we've had this big turnover of players. And I think the hope this year was that we would avoid that, because we lost Callum O'Hare to Sunderland. He left on a free at Sunderland.
Sheffield United. Yeah.
To
Thinking about
Sheffield
us
United.
already. Yeah,
He was linked with Sunderland, I think. Uh,
probably didn't want to pay his
uh,
wages.
yeah, and so he left to Sheffield United. But that was really the only starting player we lost. We brought in a couple of handy players. We brought in Radoni, we brought in Mason Clark, and I think we were quite positive that okay, there shouldn't be this sort of lag period at the beginning of the season now, but there was, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, you mentioned you started the season that they've been very slow. So your first 12 games, you won three, drew three, and lost six, and had 12 points, and that you found yourselves in 22nd.
Yeah,
Were the alarm bells starting to ring there from the fan base that, or was it just like basically, we'll be all right. This always happens.
I think it was kind of a mixture of both. I mean, when you say the fan base, I mean, I don't. The only real contact I have with the fan base is on Reddit. It's like on the Reddit subreddit of Coventry, and my dad. But then my dad is a very biased supporter. It's useless talking to him. He's always very dramatic. Get rid of him. Sack him. Sack the manager. But I think a lot of people were thinking, it is typical of Coventry. We'll get through it. But then the other half was saying, well, wait a minute, we have a very good squad. And the chairman was saying, we have a very good squad. And he expected more. And I think that's ultimately what led to Robin's demise. I don't know. I don't think I was too worried. It was frustrating. There were close games at the beginning of the season. And you just got to look at how Robbins is now even, and he doesn't concede a lot of goals. He doesn't score a lot of goals, and that was kind of the beginning of the season. It was 1-0, 1-1, losing by one, winning by one, and it was just pretty typical Coventry, really.
Yeah. Well, I mean, compared to Sunderland, I mean, we flew out the traps after the first 12
That's
games. I
it, yeah.
mean, I think we were first as well. We had like 9 wins, 1 draw, 2 defeats. We had 28 points, and that was like totally out of the blue from our perspective after we finished 16th last year in the shit
Yeah.
show. And obviously, changing managers during the season didn't help. But anyway, it was a few games later, and after 14 games on the 7th of November, Mark
Mhm.
Robbins was sacked after 7.5 years. Did that really feel like a bit like, I don't know, someone had died because he'd been there for so long? He was the longest serving manager in the AFL. He'd taken you from League Two to the Championship, League FA Cup semi-final, uh, playoff final. Did it
Yeah,
not
I
seem
mean,
a bit hasty?
I don't think you'll find. I think 99% of the Coventry fan base would say it was a disgrace, and I'm among those 99%. I think it was unreal. Like you say, he did all of all of those things. We were nearly bottom of League Two. He came back because he was manager of us before and sort of took a break in between and went to Huddersfield and somewhere else. I think I can't remember. And then he came back, and he brought us up from the ashes. He really did, and he was there with the terrible previous owners. He was working under the new owner, seemingly very well. Um, so yeah, when we got rid of him, I mean, the first thing people were saying you got to put a statue up. He needs a statue, like next to Jimmy Hill. um, but they were saying that, and I think when they got rid of him, our form was just sort of turning actually as they got rid of him. I think we just beaten. I think we'd beaten Luton, and then I think we beat Middlesbrough away. I think we had a really good result against Middlesbrough, and then we lost at home, and it was a terrible performance. I do remember that. And then yeah, it was kind of out the blue because it did feel like the tide was turning a little bit. But I
What,
know that. Sorry.
why do you think he was so successful at Coventry? What made him the right fit for the job and made his longevity at the club so positive and so yeah,
I think
basically.
he had a very clear philosophy of how to play football, and it was quite a simple way of playing football. Like he didn't overcomplicate football at all, and I think he made it very clear to the players, right? This is your role. This is what you need to do, and he told the position. He told every player in that position, this is what you need to do. Don't overcomplicate it, and let the creative players do the creative work. The defenders do simple work. And I think if you look at his record, his defensive record that was kind of what the success was built on. We very rarely won 4-0 or 4-3. They were normally 1-0s, 2-1s, things like this. And I think because there was such a high turnover of players, as I said, players coming in could just fit into that system, And I think the other thing that was really key was his assistant was Adi Vivash, because Mark Robbins is such a softly spoken guy. You never saw him standing up and shouting on the sidelines. And then AD Vivash is the total opposite. He's an absolute nutter who's going red in the face, shouting at the players on the sideline, putting the fear of God into them, kind of thing. And so I think those two as a combination were a fantastic combination. And Vivash got sacked actually at the end of or midway through last season. I think a lot of fans were really taken aback by that because it was such a great partnership. And then over the last summer, Doug King, the chairman, said to Robbins, "Okay, well, I'll let you rebuild the backroom staff." And he brought in he brought in players. He brought in George Boateng. He brought in all of these really specialized coaches for each role.
Hmm.
And so I think the chairman was really expecting, okay, we can't have a slow start. I've given you everything you wanted. And he got this slow start. And I think that's why that was what the chairman said it was because of. Is because of the slow start and that the backroom staff weren't working.
Hmm.
So I think that's why we got rid of him.
Yeah, and like the backroom staff, did they stay on after he left, or?
Most of them left, and we'd signed them on 2-year contracts or 2 or 3 year contracts. So Boateng left. There was a couple of others who left. I can't remember their names. But then when Lampard came in, he brought in a few of his own guys in. So yeah, most of them left.
Mhm. Well, I mean, you mentioned there, like, he got sacked after 14 games, after a 2-1 defeat at home to Derby County.
Yeah,
I think you mentioned before it was a terrible game, but then typical, you played us the next game with no manager,
yeah,
and you come back from 2-0 down, you draw 2-2. I mean, I remember watching that game here in my house, and I think that was like the best 45 minutes, maybe apart from the Sheffield Wednesday game where we won 4-0 at home, the second game of the season,
yeah.
where we scored two worldies. I mean, Isidore scored a great goal. Cirkin went on a running like thunder bastard from 25 yards with his left foot. And I thought, like, wow, well, we're just blowing Coventry. That doesn't happen for Sunderland. And obviously, after the second half, we just let you back into the game 2-2.
Yeah.
Um, and that was the start. Well, that was like the middle of a bad run for us because we'd drawn the previous two games. We'd drawn at home to away to QPR 0-0. Job got sent off, I think. We had Preston at home, sorry, away, and we drew away. Then we had you guys, then we drew at Millwall, drew at West Brom, and we got beat against Sheffield United. So for me, that was like a critical point
Yeah.
that we had five draws in a row and one defeat, and I don't think we really recovered from that because
I remember watching it as well. I watched it with another Sunderland fan, Chris. I don't
yeah.
know if you did it, but I watched it with him out in Plencia, and yeah, I watched the first half, and I was just like, I'm not going to watch the second half. This is awful. And I think there was a Formula One or something else on at the same time, and so we were there with a few people, and they put that on, and then I was kind of watching it half on my phone, and Coventry scored, and I was like, well, this is out the blue. Like you say, we were completely blown out of the water in the first half. And I remember that Isidore goal was a golazo, no? It was a real good goal.
Yeah,
And I think at half time, I thought absolutely no chance. And yeah, I don't know what changed. It was a real surprise that Sunderland just didn't turn up in the second half. Real surprise.
story of our season, I think, for us,
Yeah.
Tom. Yeah,
'Cause I
second
wouldn't
half.
say that Coventry were good second half, honestly. I think we were pushing, but I think if Sunderland had just, I don't know, you're kind of playing this like you were 0-0 almost, you know?
Yeah, we have this kind of thing where we take our foot off the gas, but I mean, even through the season, that's kind of disappeared little by little.
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, so you got a 2-2 draw then. Haji Wright was one of the key players in that game because
Yeah.
he scored. I think he scored the equaliser. It might have been, but
Could have
then
been.
then he got injured and he was out
Yeah.
for a good couple of months, I think, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. That was kind of not story of our season, but it was a kind of a thread throughout the season was injuries and injuries to big players just as they were hitting form. So Haji Wright had scored a couple of goals and then got injured. We lost Ben Sheaf, who's our club captain at the beginning of the year, for maybe 3 or 4 months, and we didn't have any other holding midfielders. You know, we had sort of backup players to go in there, and then we lost Mason Clark when he was just hitting a bit of form, and yeah, and then recently the goalkeeper we lost about a month ago. So yeah, it's been a thread throughout that we'd lost key players at key moments just as they're hitting form.
Hmm.
But I think in previous seasons we wouldn't have had this cover, but now at least we have a little bit of cover in certain positions. But
Hmm.
yeah,
Well, Big Frank came in on the 28th of November. I think I remember talking to you at work about it,
yeah,
but maybe it was like a week or two before that it got announced that he'd been linked.
yeah,
And I was actually telling you, like, wow, that'll be like a nightmare for you. He'll take you down because obviously after his spell at Everton, he wasn't very good there. Um, Again, what was your reaction? And obviously your dad or whatever the fans were saying on Reddit. What would when Lampard was linked? Was there kind of optimism because of what he'd done at Derby? Were they
no,
focused on that?
no, absolutely not. I think we'd been linked with a few managers, and you know, hindsight's a wonderful thing because I think we were linked with Van Nistelrooy because he just left Manchester United, and so I think a lot of fans were saying, "Well, let's get Van Nistelrooy in," and then he obviously took the Leicester job, and then I mean, linked with Frank. I was saying anyone but Frank Lampard, absolutely anyone but Frank Lampard. My dad was like, "No, get him in. You know, whoever, anyone will do the job better than Robbins." You know, my dad is already celebrating Robbins had gone, but I think we were linked with. I wanted Bloomfield, I think it was from Wickham, and I
Yep.
think he ended up going to Luton in the end. But no, I don't think many people thought this is an inspired choice by the chairman because of his previous, you know, he'd had that run with Derby, you know, he picked them up, he got them into the playoffs. but then he'd also had those spells at Everton and Chelsea where, if you can't perform with bigger players, then I don't know, maybe this is his level. I don't know. But when he was appointed, I was devastated. Devastated, to be honest. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of people were upset. We've got rid of this legend to bring in a Chelsea legend. And you're like,
Well, I mean, his first game was a 1-1 draw at home to Cardiff, no, on the 30th of November,
Yeah,
and you were 2 points above relegation at this point. You were 17th.
that's it.
I mean, under Robbins, I think the lowest position you were was 22nd after 12 matches.
That's it.
So what exactly has Lampard changed then?
Well, I think when he came in, I remember his first press conference, and it's the typical spiel of new managers. We're going to play fast, attractive football. The fans, we're going to bring the fans back, and da 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 da. And he just wasn't in those first few games, and it was just the same as how we'd been performing, the same system. And like Robbins before he was leaving was changing between 3 and 4 at the back because of injuries, and Lampard was doing the same. Lampard was changing his team every week. He's changing the positions, and I guess that was him finding the best players for the best positions. And what was the question? What changed? Do you think? What
Yeah.
was the question?
What did he do differently to Robbins? Because you said like Robbins like basically didn't overcomplicate things, kept it simple. So what tweaks did Lampard make
Well,
to get you on that run, no, in the third quarter of the season?
yeah, well, I think initially nothing seemed to change. I think this was it. And that was the confusing thing was, well, the style, the philosophy seemed to be exactly the same. And I don't know whether that was Lampard trying not to rock the boat too much, or the players just being so sort of indoctrined with this style of football that they didn't know any other way. But I think what changed when we hit that form, because I think the first few games Lampard was in charge, we didn't do too much. Like we didn't go straight on that run of incredible form. Like I think we lost to
Well, your second
Portsmouth loss. I
your
think.
second 12 games, or it's like from match day 13 to 24, you had 4 wins, 4 draws, and 4 defeats. So you did improve
Yeah,
slightly. You got 16 points to the 12 points in the first 12 games.
that's
But
it.
obviously, you were 15th at that time. But then obviously the third set of 12 games, that's
Yeah,
when you really kicked on. You went from 15th to 5th,
yeah,
which is where you've finished now. But you won 9. Was it drew 1 and lost 2, 28 points.
yeah.
So it was that third quarter, wasn't it? That things really started to click.
Yeah, and I think that was we had a few players coming back. Like I think Hadji Wright came back halfway through that run, and Mason Clark as well, and Sheaf came back. And I think the biggest turning point of the season, in my point of view, was when we signed Matt Grimes from Swansea in the January transfer window, because that player that was exactly what we were missing. I don't know if Sunderland have a player like that. He sits in front of the back four,
No, we don't.
drops in. But he's so confident on the ball, and I mean, hopefully Coventry will see it on Friday night. But he's just so comfortable, so like a proper quarterback, like really sprays the passes, just calms everyone down, and that was what we were missing, and that was what Sheaf had, and that was what Hamer had before that as well. Like this complete general in the middle of midfield, and Grimes is exactly that player. And for me, that's what turned the season. I think he was pivotal to our run of form under Lampard. And I mean, I think whenever you have a run like that of really good form, there is an element of luck involved. And there was a few super close games that we won in the last 5-10 minutes of the game. That, if that goal doesn't go in, I mean, it's big ifs and maybes, but we had a lot of luck through that run as well. A lot of luck. Like there was a game against Oxford, I think, where we scored in the last minute, and there was a game against, was it Bristol City, where we scored in the last minute, and just really late goals, But you love to see
It's not, yeah.
it.
When it happens,
Yeah,
you mentioned Mark Grimes there, and he was one of the people that I've seen from Coventry fans, the podcast online, that he was like a key player when he came in, and
yeah,
he mentioned that kind of fundamental position, right, in front of the back four,
yeah.
the kind of quarterback. And we haven't had a place like that since probably Corey Evans. He
Right.
was our last player like that, and when he left, obviously he was getting on a bit. When he left a big gap, and we didn't really replace him. And this season, our club captain Dan Neil, who is like further forward, he normally plays like number 8 role. We kind of shifted him to the number 4 role, and for me, he's a very good player, but he just doesn't control the game
Yeah.
as much as he should for that position. So I think yeah, we are kind of desperately needing that player. I mean, we signed a player called Abdul Salis Samed,
Right.
a Ghanaian guy from Lens, and he played like Champions League football last season, but he spent
Right.
like 6 months of the season injured, and he's
Yeah, so
only
I've not heard of him. So he's yeah.
yeah, I mean, and he's basically that's his position. He's a defensive midfielder, but we got him on loan in August, and he's barely played what 5 matches, so it
Right.
seems a bit of a loss. Um,
For me that position is the most important position on a football pitch. It really is. And I think if you look at successful teams in the past, that player is always in successful teams because they do all the hard work and they allow those central midfielders who are more creative to express themselves. Because if you put a I don't know how would you describe Joe Bellingham in your team?
box to box.
So if you just have him and he's forward and he's caught forward, you're screwed, you know. So you need that guy who doesn't want the glory, you know, who sits back with the. And if you don't have that, I think it kind of limits everyone else in the team. So for me, that role is so important, so
Well,
important.
I think that's part of our problem as well because I think we've got 3 guys there in the midfield. We've got Job, Daniel, and young Chris Rigg, and for me, they're all similar players, and
Yeah,
they all like to go forward, and they leave a massive gap, and I think that's where teams exploit us.
yeah,
Um, right then, so on to your key players then. I was looking at your stats last night, and one of the first names that came out was Jack Redoni.
yeah.
Now I remember I don't know if it was like back in our last season in League One or our first season in the Championship, we tried to sign him
Oh yeah,
because he played for Wimbledon, didn't he? And then
yeah,
He went to Huddersfield,
yeah.
and I think he chose Huddersfield over us.
Really?
And then Huddersfield got relegated, and we finished 6th in the playoffs. So so he's one player that I've always liked because apart from having a massive head, um, he
He
gets
does.
around.
He's got a little beard to kind of deflect from the fact that he's got a massive head.
So I've always liked him because he's like he's a player that Sunderland fans would really like because he's in your face. He never gives up. He's like that fly that just like wanders in your face all the
Yeah.
time, isn't he? And he scored 9 goals this season. So how instrumental is he to Coventry's midfield?
Yeah, I think he was brought in to replace O'Hare, and I think we paid nearly 5 million for him in the end, which is a lot of money for a player who just got relegated. And I remember looking on. I have a friend who's a Huddersfield fan. And I asked him, I was like, Danny, what's he like? He said he's not worth 5 million. No way is he worth 5 million, but he's a good player. And I think those first sort of dozen games, like you were saying, um, he didn't really deliver much at all, and I think fans were thinking we overpaid for him. And I think he's the one who's benefited from Lampard more than anything. And I think Lampard's kind of taken him under his wing and said, like, this is how I played, this is how I want you to play. And I would guess if you look at those 9 goals he scored, I would say most of them have been under Lampard. He arrives late in the box. Grimes has given him that freedom to sort of. He kind of is a roaming playmaker. You know, he goes from left wing to right wing, kind of in the middle as well, and he's tall. Like he arrives in the box late and wins a lot of headers. The last game against Middlesbrough, he scored a header. Goal against Oxford as well was a header, and he kind of just comes in from the edge of the box. You know, we have these two wingers who sort of do their skills on the. They don't whip in early crosses. They take their time, and it allows Rodoni to get into the box and win headers. And he's a very good player, very very good. And I think he's the one who's benefited most from Lampard is Rodoni.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, another player that Sunderland fans like, but in an annoying way, is Sakamoto because every time he's
yeah,
played against us, he's always had a very good game.
yeah,
And
he's a good player.
he scored 4 goals this season.
He's a good player. He's my dad, and I agree with my dad. I don't always agree with my dad here, but at home, he's fantastic. He's absolutely fantastic, and you know he's got the fans behind him. He's a real tricky little player. He's only got a left foot. I don't know how teams haven't figured this out yet. He's only got a left foot, and so it's like if you just keep on showing him the right, he's not going to cross it. You know, he's always going to try and cut back. Um, but for me, and my dad says it as well, away from home, he's just too lightweight. I think he's just too small. And I think you need a bigger player on the right wing or the left wing when he's there. But he's got a fantastic playing relationship with our right back Van Eywick. And those two overlap, and Van Eywick is overlapping and underlapping, and it's an entertaining right wing, definitely. But I think he needs to score a few more goals.
Yeah. Well, the next player on my list is we discussed him before, Haji Wright. He's got 12 goals this season. I mean, he was one of the replacements for Victor Gyökeres, wasn't he? Really, I think he bought him and Ellis Sims at the same time.
That's it. Yeah.
So yeah, do you think Haji Wright is living up to the expectation of replacing Gyökeres?
I I think he's a good player. I don't think you can compare too many players to Gyökeres. I think for me, Gyökeres is one of apart from maybe Hamer, probably the best player I've seen play for Coventry in the last 15 years. I think Gus Hamer was out of this world good. He really was. I think Gyökeres was still quite sort of rough and ready when he was playing for Coventry, but I think Sims plays more in that central striking role now, where Gyökeres used to play. But what Gyökeres offered was he was like two players up there, like he would run all day, and he had enough skill to be able to hold it up until other players arrived, which unfortunately Ellis Sims doesn't have. He can hold it up, but he walks around the pitch a bit too much for my liking. But Haji Wright was brought in as a striker, and he's kind of evolved out more now as a left winger. And I think he's far more dangerous out on the left wing because he is left and right footed, which is fantastic. So he can cut in either side, and he's fast. He's a big lad, really big lad, but he is fast. But he's one of those players, he looks like he's walking all match, and then all of a sudden he's moving past players super fast, and he's a good player. He's not as good as Gyökeres, but he's a good player.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Ellis Sims there and not doing much. I mean, Sunderland fans can probably agree with you on that. But the thing is that he did very well for us. He scored in the short time he was with him. He scored some goals, basically classic striker goals, poachers goals. But at the time, he didn't need to do anything because he had players like Ahmad Diallo, he had Jack Clark, he had Patrick Roberts, Pritchard that were just putting passes on the plate to him, and he just had to finish them. Obviously, I think he would struggle in our team right now because there is a little bit of a lack of creativity. Right. So one of the other players I noticed as well was Bobby Clark, the defender.
Bobby Thomas.
Bobby Thomas.
Bobby Thomas. Yeah, he just got in. I think again, this is what I was saying about injuries to key players. He's got this incredible knack of getting goals from corners, and I think we're tied first for goals from corners. I saw the other day in the last match. I think we've got 11 goals from corners, and I probably would guess 6 or 7 of those have been Bobby Thomas. He's just this kind of guy who just run through a brick wall to win the header, and he was scoring. There was 3 games in a week, and he scored 2 last-minute goals or 2 very late goals, and he's become this kind of this kind of cult hero now with the Coventry fans. And then he got injured for our last 4 games. Well, not the Middlesbrough game, but the last 4 games before that. We were missing him, and you could tell we were missing him because he's a real presence at the back, big lad. And again, a player who's really benefited alongside Kitching. They've become our 2 starting backs. Under Lampard, he decided, okay, these 2 are my 2 centre backs. I'm going to stick with these 2 and not rotate it. But he's a definite threat from corners. Definite threat. Yeah, and I think that's because Rodoni is such a great corner taker as well. There's another aspect that Rodoni's got to him, is that he can put it on a plate for our central defenders.
It wouldn't surprise me if he actually scores against us because one of our downfalls is defending corners and set pieces. I mean, we've conceded a lot of headers.
We look dangerous from corners, and it was. I think we had it was a couple of years ago. I remember going to Wembley and for the playoff final, and I went with my dad, and the guy sat next to me was saying that we hadn't scored from a corner in 3.5 years or something. And I said, that can't be true. And it was true. And now all of a sudden we're scoring corners every other week. And I don't know what's changed. I guess it's Rodoni and the delivery.
Yep. Well, I mean, 2 other players I've got written down here is Victor Torp and Mason Clark. They've also chipped in with some good goals. I mean, out of the players that I've mentioned there, will all of them be starting, do you think?
Victor Torp's injured, so he won't be starting. Bobby Thomas, he came back and played a full 90 minutes against Middlesbrough, so I think he'll be playing. Mason Clark probably won't start. I would guess it would be Sakamoto and Haji Wright. But apart from that, it will be. I mean, our lineup's pretty straightforward. I think the only one that I would be unsure about is our left back, whether it be Bidwell or De Silva, because De Silva was on a suspension from the Luton game.
Mhm.
I prefer Bidwell because De Silva's about 4'1". He's just so small, and so if you put a big striker on him, like Plymouth did, I think is it Bundu, the guy,
Yeah.
and they just put him on there, and it was hopeless against De Silva. But I think it'll be Grimes, and then it'll probably be Rodoni and Sheaf in the middle, and then probably Ellis Sims up front would be my
Yeah.
guess.
Ellis Sims, or let's hope he doesn't come back to haunt us. Right. Well, one other player with an interesting Sunderland connection is one of your goalkeepers, Ben Wilson.
And Wilson, yeah,
So he's a Sunderland Academy graduate and apparently a massive Sunderland fan.
he is.
I,
Yeah,
I I understand that he's been injured a bit this season, but he's come back in the sticks at the end of the season, I believe.
that's it. It's been our Achilles heel's been our keeper the last couple of seasons because I mean, Ben Wilson, when we got to the playoffs with Gyökeres, scored I think it was the penultimate game. He scored against Blackburn at Ewood Park. It was the most obvious handball I've ever seen. But it was a last minute corner. Ben Wilson sort of handled it into the goal. Nobody saw it. Thank God for no VAR in the Championship, and we got into the playoffs. And ever since then, he's become this cult figure. And then I think that season he got goalkeeper of the year. I think that was what 23, 24, 23, 24, no, 23, 22, 23.
Hmm.
He was goalkeeper of the year. And then we bought in Brad Collins, who'd got relegated with Barnsley. And it was a bit like, okay. And he wasn't very good. So Brad Collins came in. Then Ben Wilson came back in. And then this year we signed a Swedish keeper, Dovin. And he just is young. He's a young keeper. And then so Ben Wilson, I think, played one game in October, had a knee injury and was out. And then Dovin came under a bit of fire, then became a really solid goalkeeper and got injured about 6 weeks ago. And all the fans were like, don't put Collins in goal. You cannot put Collins in goal. And he put Collins in goal and he's cost us, I would say, 12 points with he's Elan Melier kind of calamities. It's absolutely terrible mistakes he's making. And then Ben Wilson came in for the last game of the season, and was probably man of the match. He was absolutely fantastic. But I don't know why Lampard wasn't picking him because he's got a proper big thick Macam accent, really like big character. And for me, I don't mind goalkeepers like that. If they make a mistake, they hold their hands up and they've got enough about them to be honest with their mistakes.
Yeah,
I think he's a great lad, and I love his accent.
do you think he's likely to start against us then? Will he be the number one? Yeah.
If he doesn't, I don't know why he would put Brad Collins in goal. Please start Ben Wilson.
Are you not kind of worried in the back of your head that he's a Macam? If it goes to penalties.
We've had plenty of Macams playing for us down the years.
Jordan Henderson, yeah.
We've that's still our claim to fame. Jordan Henderson played for Coventry. Yeah. I was talking to Chris, another Macam here in Bilbao, about there's been a lot of players who've gone between Sunderland and Coventry. So I remember a couple of years ago we sold you Lee Burge and Jordan Willis.
Yeah.
And then
Simon Moore.
Simon Morris. Oh yeah. He played for my local team in England, Basingstoke, was where he played.
Yeah.
But there's been quite a few links with players.
Well, did you have Martin Waghorn as well?
Yeah,
he played for you. Yeah,
he was there a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Right then. So, in terms of we've touched on Coventry players. Who are the Sunderland players that you were kind of most worried about that could cause the damage?
I think on paper, when you see the name Bellingham, that's the one you're instantly drawn to. And I think at the beginning of the season, Job was playing fantastically well. No, was he?
Yeah, he was.
And I know I've spoken to you a few times before work on a Monday, and we talk about what happened at the weekend. And it seems as though his discipline is an issue, that he's still young and a raw talent. So I think if a good version of Job turns up, I think that's one of the players I think Coventry will be worried about. I think from the previous meeting, Isidore, is he fit? I'm not really sure who
he is fit,
still playing in your team.
But he might not start, because I think we've got this young Spanish lad, Eliza Mayenda, who is better, is more in form. I mean, Isidore hasn't scored for about 10, 11 games now, and he got dropped. So, but we know Isidore can come up with these moments. But yeah, I would expect Mayenda to start, but Mayenda started against you at Coventry when you beat us 3-0. So, but yeah, there's Isidore, yeah.
I think Rig as well. I think those. I think people look at Rig and think he's a Premier League player for sure. No, like he's a real talent. But I think, like you say, I mean, I think if you ask a lot of Coventry fans who they're scared of, they look at the last game against Sunderland, and we won 3-0 fairly comfortably. No, and I can't even remember much of a threat from Sunderland at all. So
No, and that was probably our worst performance of the season, and the only time we've been beaten by more than 2 goals.
I
Uh,
saw on your like form that it was the worst result of the season was 3-0 at Coventry.
I mean, that was right before the international break as well, and like our
That's right.
coach Regis Lebris put it down to fatigue, tiredness. And he said that it wouldn't happen again, but then it did happen again against Oxford a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, Chris Rigg, 17 years old, great player, but I
Incredible.
think he's been overplayed this year. He's played about 30 odd 40 games, and he just looks completely knackered. And the Sunderland fans are really hoping that he doesn't play tomorrow, and that ends all the fear. Our 24 million loan signing from Roma will finally be allowed to play in the number 10 role that we've all been waiting to see him, because
Where's
he's
he been
been
playing all season?
he's been no well he signed in January, and he came in on the left because Romain Mundle, our left winger, he got injured.
Right.
But he's back fit and training. I don't know if he'll start tomorrow, or Regis said he won't make it tomorrow, but that could be mind games. Um, but if we can have Mundle on the left, it would free up Lefebvre to go in the middle in the number 10 role, and it would give us that spark that we need to get creative again, because we haven't been very creative recently with Joe Brigand and Dan Neil. So I think Lefebvre as well, if he can play in that role, if you've got a 24 million loan player,
Yeah. He's got to
you,
start delivering at some point.
well, yeah, and he basically as well. He had a couple of great games at the start, and he got injured for a couple of months, and he's come back, and he played one game in the number 10, and then Mundle got injured, so it was basically we haven't seen the best of him yet, and
Yeah.
we're kind of hoping that the playoffs will see the best of him. Right then, so tomorrow then we've got the away leg in our case, at the CBS Stadium. Your home form is the fifth best in the league this season. You got 14 wins, 3 draws, and 6 losses. So
Yeah.
on paper that looks kind of like makes you kind of confident, doesn't it?
I think so. I think, I think a couple of those losses were obviously against Leeds and Burnley. So it's like that's kind of everyone's got 2 home losses, it seems. Yeah, it's been full. It's that's the big difference. I think this year is that we sold more season tickets this year than we'd sold in ever. No, because before that we were at Highfield Road and didn't have that many seats. I think we sold 22,000 season tickets this year, which is incredible for a team like Coventry. And I think we broke was it the West Brom game, or maybe no, it was the last game, the Middlesbrough game. It was our highest ever league attendance. I think it was 30, nearly 32,000.
hmm
So I think it's a real good atmosphere there at the moment. Really,
hmm
really good.
Well, I mean, I've been kind of a bit pessimistic about tomorrow's match, because obviously we haven't won in the last God knows how many games. We've lost the
Yeah.
last 5 in a row. Apparently, we've been in playoff mode, and we've been like kind of like taking our foot off the gas. But I don't know how much of that you can
Yeah.
say is true. But if you look at our away form this season, we're the fourth best in the league. We've won
Right.
9, drawn 6, and lost 8. So we are capable of going out and grinding out a result or getting a result. But obviously, that Coventry game 3-0 was a one-off. So do you think there's a psychological advantage for Coventry ahead of this match because of the fact that you came back from 2-0 down 2-2, then you beat us 3-0? Do you think there's like a little psychological edge, or do you think it just goes out the window for the playoffs?
Uh, I would say there's a slight edge, but because it's the playoffs, and I've seen Coventry go through the playoffs enough times and enough teams to go through the playoffs that they are the playoffs. That's the great thing about them. It's the best way to win and the worst way to lose is the playoffs. And that's what the cliche is. And I think if you look at, for example, we have a friend, Darren, who's a Sheffield United fan,
Yeah.
and he always tells us and reminds us how few games Sheffield United have ever won in the playoffs. They've never won the playoffs. And so I don't know, I wouldn't put it past Bristol City beating Sheffield United tonight. I would give us a slight edge. I think, at home, having gone 3-0, having just got in, we've got some momentum behind us. You guys haven't won in 5 games, 6 games. I would give us a slight psychological edge. But if players can't get up for a playoff semi-final, then, I don't know. I would then also say, then back at the Stadium of Light, you guys have got a big advantage as well. It's going to be full. The atmosphere is going to be out of this world. So I think it's obvious. It sounds a bit of a cop out to say it's 50-50, but I would give us an advantage at home, definitely.
Well, I mean, yeah, the thing is that your away form, you're 12th in the away form table. You've got 6 wins, 5 draws, and 1 defeat, I think it is. So what do you put down the poor away form? What do you put it down to?
Um, I think it's one of the reasons is we play the same style of football, home and away. And in theory, it doesn't make a difference if you're home or away, but it does. In practice, the atmosphere, the way the home team reacts, they play differently. People play differently home and away for sure. And I think a lot of teams set up against us away. Well, when we're away, they set up in this counter-attacking kind of style, and they really lull Coventry into playing this quite sort of with our fullbacks bombing forward. So we leave 3 back basically, and most of the goals we concede away are massive counter-attacking goals. And when you're away, the other teams are so much more up for it, I feel, when they're at home. And that's where we get caught. Like, for example, against Plymouth the other week, it was a copy paste 3 same goals. Both our wing backs had bombed forward. The goalkeeper caught it and just booted it upfield to the tall guy, and that was it. And so I think it's that we're not very flexible. I don't think Lampard really has this flexibility to put loads of men behind the ball or to just play for a 0-0 kind of thing. And I think that's where we've lost a lot of points, is trying to just push forward and be a bit too adventurous away from home rather than settle for a point. And it was the same with the Luton game. We played most of the Luton game with 10 men, and we did put 10 men behind the ball, and then they got a player sent off in the 70th minute. And all of a sudden we were just pushing everyone forward, and it's just like, whoa, stop, take a point. If we can get a win, fantastic, but don't push everyone forward. And that's what we did, and we conceded. And I think it's just a bit of naivety, maybe from Lampard's point of view or from the players' point of view, just to be able to hold a point or hold a win. And I think that's what it is away from home. Whereas at home, for some reason, maybe it's the fans, like shouting at them for doing something stupid or giving the ball away. The players seem to realize at home, okay, sit on a lead, protect the lead or whatever. So I think that's what it is.
So with your away form in mind then, what would you feel comfortable with for a result for Coventry taken to the Stadium of Light? A goal advantage, a draw, a 2-goal advantage? What would you
I think we got to win at home. If we come away with a win, it's fantastic. I would never say a one goal lead is enough, because I would always say the home team should score. So a couple of goals advantage, I would be delighted with. But I know it won't be. I know it won't be that easy.
Well, I mean, I was looking last night at Coventry's goals, and obviously you've scored 64 goals this season. You've conceded 58. We've scored 58 and conceded 44. But what I noticed about the results was they were very up and down, weren't they? Like there were a lot of goals. You either scored a lot of goals and won, or you lost and you kind of lost heavily.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's exactly it. Like we go 1-0 down, and then all of a sudden we push everyone forward, and it's like completely gung ho, and we kind of all of our philosophies and sort of discipline of behind the ball and staying in position kind of goes out the window. I don't mind it too much, I'd rather have a go and try and score than lose. I mean, if we lose 4-0, we lose 4-0. Yes, that. Obviously now in the playoffs, that's not the philosophy. But in the league, no, I don't mind us pushing it and going crazy. But yeah, it's been entertaining under Lampard, because those kind of results never happened under Robbins, ever.
Yeah, well. Anyway, listen, Tom. We'll kind of stop there and wrap it up. But anyway, just want to say
Are
thank you again for your time.
we going to be
Uh,
bold enough to make school predictions or not? Well, you don't do
I
that.
was trying to avoid that question, but now that you've mentioned it, I mean, I've been saying on other episodes of the podcast and other podcasts that I've done, I think the a 1-1 draw will be good for us.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw.
Okay.
What about yourself?
I'm going to go 2-0 Coventry.
2-0
But hey,
Coventry.
I'm a Coventry fan, obviously.
Well, listen, mate, if that happens, you know that on Saturday we have to work together in the academy, and I know that you teach the younger kids and you take them cooking, so I might have to sabotage your cookie dough and your pizza dough by doing something to it. So
I
little
don't eat them. I don't
yeah,
eat them. They're for the
no,
kids.
but little Mikkel who takes it home to his mum and dad might say it's a funny taste. So that's all I'm going to say. If you beat us, beware. Anyway, Tom, mate, top man, and thanks for coming on. And
Cheers, Barnsley.
listen, wish you the best of luck
But
next
not too
season
much.
in the championship. All right. Um, right. Cheers, mate. I'll see you soon.
Cheers, Lee. Thanks, fella.